Chile here with siriustalesmoon. This is Mars hour, Mars night. It is midheaven, 9 degrees, Aries, degree of the moon, degree of completion, and the moon is in 1 degree, Cancer, trining black moon Lilith, nay, in conjuncting black moon Lilith, opposing Mercury. The ascendant is right on retrograde Jupiter in Cancer. And Mars is exalted in Capricorn, 13 degrees Capricorn. I want to bring to you a message from the number 9 when it comes to Moon Mars. And number 9 has to do with completion. We open the year 1, which is foundation. And the moon is a lot to do with foundation, but also with completion. So when we think about energy, we think about the moon. We think about the movement of the moon, the receptivity, and yet with the receptivity there is an environment where something grows. The moon is associated with growth. And when we talk about the degree of completion is something that is coming to fruition. In Aries is the head of the baby. So Aries reminds us that the conception, the fertility, the birthing, the upbringing is something that has energy connection to the housing and the nourishment to do with the land, the people, and what we call real estate. This is why energy that births sovereignty has been a point of competition and with that understanding we have the discernment. When we talk about energy sovereignty, we cannot even begin to assess the science, to have true cohesive information. Let's say one is an empress or an emperor, and they need to keep the energy of the empire sovereign, so that the people are sovereign, so that the head of the empire is sovereign, so that the empire is sovereign. One intermixes with the other. Leaders are people, people are leaders. We see that with eclipses. And if they want to know, should they go for energy based on which element? Water, air, fire, earth. How do they do this alchemy? If it is earth, how is the mining process? If it is air, what happens? Do we need storm to generate energy? If it is fire, what is burned? And what are the residues? If it is water, how is that energy derived? If it is something that recycles itself, okay, what is the entire process? And to have a true cohesive understanding of what are the possibilities. And as we paint these questions with these colors, it's quite obvious that energy sovereignty, when we talk about the bigger unit, is not one source. When the snow defreezes in the spring, we have waterfalls for countries that have mountains. When the wind blows, we have windmills. When people anyway need to warm themselves and light a fire, then what are they to burn? Or can they store the other previous two? Mining energy means we use fire, and the minerals are used to build the devices, whether it's pipes or the infrastructure. But then the question is again, what do we burn? Are there toxic residues from what we burn? Do these toxic residues affect, for example, the air or the water? Let's say they create CO2. Okay, we can plant a forest. But we would need to accommodate for that forest. We would need land to offset. Let's say it's toxins, then that can harm the air and the water. People breathe toxins, then we can warm them in the winter, but then they will have all kinds of weird diseases. If, if it pollutes the water, again, similar problem. If it pollutes the water in a way that they can boil the water, then we would have to boil the water, the water, which will cost us energy. Those engineering questions are not simple, however. When the soul and the spirit is clear to deal with them, which means that we can access the true cohesion, we can access science, we can deal with the problems. But what happens when, let's say, we discover that there is a country, Norway, there is a country, Norway, that although it sells, whether it's gas or oil, that country, Norway, is reliant on other energies, for example, solar. But it's Norway, it's the Arctic. Don't ask me. Maybe they absorb the aurora, I don't know. You see, when I was discussing energy and solar energy in 2015, and some students of mine remember that. I wasn't discussing that in class, but they approached me because of that, because they were inspired. And I said, well, Saudi Arabia is an oil giant. Tomorrow it can open a solar farm. And do an oil embargo on the entire world. Saudi Arabia oil is standard oil. I did not know that. I just thought in energy. Now, um, when people talk about solar energy, said, well, some people say, I live in Canada, I live in this, and live in that. Well, in Netherlands, they built a Lightyear 1 fully powered solar car. It's not a sunny country. But then I learned about Norway. It sold gas and oil to everyone else. They live in the Arctic. They live in the fucking Arctic. In the fucking Arctic. Half a year is no sun. They managed to do it. So, when I know there exists a phenomena called extortion cults, child trafficking, cults based on addiction to not just sex, but committing atrocities. Sex is wonderful, but if people come from dopamine, then they need more and more violence. That's why I say, I had a physics teacher in high school who said, sex without love is like, I'm sorry, raping a chicken. And they do this with animals as well. So, infants, forcing mothers to watch their children, the 2 years old children, being raped. And you say, what's all this for? And it's filmed, why? The thing is that, let's say a country can go without oil. And not only that, Germany. When it comes to peace, denuclearification, that country decides not to be the epicenter of a bombs or nuclear energy. But it means that it will no longer rely on standard oil. In this case, standard oil would need to have several members of the government filmed raping babies, preferably, so that they can agree. The White March, I believe, happened in Paris too. Marc Dutroux was originating from Brussels. He was ritually abused and then became an abuser. Bomb Germany! Is it rational? No. Why do they do it? How will they explain to people the reality of the cult in which they were either born into and are even dissociated from most of what they were going through as children and putting through others as children? Now, the number 9, as we are in year 1 The number 9 reminds us that we are in the spirit of completion. When we think about year 1, laying the foundation for the coming 9 years, for the coming decades, to have foundations that actually bring a year 9 that is of completion, joy, celebration. By the way, my mother told me there was this event in Switzerland where they say something flew from the champagne and burned the entire. I hope the bunkers are not made of wood. And a lot of banks in Swiss banks, sometimes they do human sacrifice, usually around the new year. I, to rule that C factor, one would need to abolish extortion codes. Because this is a factor that could explain how a champagne bottle rises to burn the entire. I mean, this is what happens when they make policies that everybody will have to pay for the water and the surf water is too expensive. We need water to put down the fire. Falcon, people that have ascendant in could die in their own home being burned. Please do not advocate against water. Okay, do not advocate in favor of depriving or cutting the water. Okay, just as an astrologer. Which reminds me that when we talk about energy sovereignty, we need to have enough water to put down the fire for whatever we burn so that it won't. Or sand. By the way, that could make Qatar incredibly rich. They have a lot of sand. People can throw sand at the fire. But how will they power the planes that transport the sand? See, scientific problems I've been dealing with all my life are not easy to solve. We don't need to make reality any harder. The best way to deal with politics is to know the truth. And the only way to know the truth is to support sexual sovereignty, honoring the yes, no, and maybe. And for the authentic sexuality, meaning not misplaced arousal, but relaxed arousal. And that means meeting both non-erotic needs and erotic needs adaptively. See, if you can get a politician addicted to sex, you can make them do everything now. If he's addicted to sex, he will never make a decision that doesn't have a backlash. Because this is the essence of his sexuality, is action Mars. This is why sexpionage at its fundamental is not yielding sovereignty. In fact, when USSR practiced that, it fell. They knocked down the drug lord, but they lost USSR. And it's not about morality, because it has to come authentically from meeting authentically our needs, erotically and non-erotically, in a way that is adaptable, in a way that is not rapey. It's not around control, but around sovereignty. And whenever big empires want to be sovereign, they have to look at the concept of sovereignty and practice sovereignty in praxis all the way to what's beneath the legs, what's between the legs. Very challenging art. They can't spiritually bypass. Very challenging art. To us, because we've come accustomed to a world where pretty much anything relies on something that relies on rape of infants. and sees that as religious prohibition, when they either have prohibition or lack of inhibition around the prohibition, but no authentic sovereign self. And when it comes to energy sovereignty, energy. So this message from the number 9 is to remember year 9s that we had, and to understand that we are laying the foundations. Even if one is not sexually sovereign now, even if one has addictions, even if one deals with all kinds of, whether religious shame, religious trauma, the way they see the world, dopamine addictions, they can lay today the foundations to do something about this. To regain their sovereignty. Because what we lay foundations now, in 9 years, will see fruition. It's not for nothing that the moon nourishment is growth. The head of the baby Mars is the I am, is identity, but also to do with asserting oneself. And the Jupiter is true cohesion that we can only have with, was Jupiter exalted in Cancer, because in Cancer it is well nourished. So it's not what? Incestuous. And then both Jupiter and everyone else can have their I am, Aries sovereignty. So this was my cocoa maca drinking not ceremony. Nothing to elaborate. And I had a lovely tea from mallow and clover, the leaves of clover. Very, very nice, because the mallow has a distinct scent, smell, taste, and I used maple, although I'd really like to know if there is maple that doesn't harm the tree. Okay, I know there is myrrh and frankincense, so come on, maple. It's going to be a bit more expensive. But this is something that's missing. It's It's a blue ocean because the sap is very healing, but if we hurt to heal, then we don't gain actual healing. And that to me is something that's missing. And then the clover has this kind of nice lemony taste. Um, it's really great. Some calendula flowers and some dandelions. That was my tea. At the first cup I put a little bit of maple, and I drink it almost to the end, and I add water. Put it almost to the end, I add water. Um, and that's basically how I make my tea. So, happy new 2026.